You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Kerry Greenaway and Mark Manley on the Dark Mirror Paranormal Show, only on Parasearch Radio.
A good evening and welcome to the Dark Mirror Show. I am Kerry Greenaway and I am joined by my gorgeously lovely, sexy, wonderful co-host, Mark Manley. Good evening, Mark.
What are you after? You're being really nice.
I know, I'm being really nice to you tonight. It's hot. That's what it is. It's so hot tonight. It can only be nice when it's this hot. Are you okay?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I was quietly melting yesterday, but not too bad now.
I think we might have a storm down my way tonight. We haven't had one yet. So
And we're supposed to have.
We are supposed to be having storms coming across the UK tonight. So tonight, let's hope it kicks off storm-wise while we're talking about our subject tonight. Mark, what are we going to discuss tonight?
Well, it's the first of a two-parter. We are doing crystal skulls next week and the alien factor.
You had to get it in.
But this week we will do screaming skulls and things like that.
Whenever I looked at this, every time I saw screaming skulls, I actually wanted to do a scream. I actually wanted to let out a blood-curdling scream. I'm not going to because it's never
Then
pleasant
do it.
when you do that.
Just imagine it's your first night at the prom.
I really fancy doing it, but I'm not going to because I'll probably blow my speakers up or something. Because I'm quite a loud person, as you know, so I probably would have police around my door.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's have a look at screaming skulls, because this subject, I remember years and years and years and years ago, when I very first started reading about the paranormal when I was like in my teens. I read a book, it was just like a penguin book, and it was like Penguin Book of the Unexplained or something like that. And they had...
Yes, I remember them. Yeah.
Do you remember those? And I remember that there was a story about the screaming skull, and for some reason, it kind of connected with everything you would imagine from like a ghost story haunting thing, didn't it? It kind of ticks a lot of boxes to screaming skulls.
That's right, yeah, because I can remember all that from school. And that's, to be absolutely honest, that's pretty much what got me into the paranormal start off with, because I used to read loads and loads of books from the age of about 3, stupidly young age. And I can remember those school books that they had on like screaming skulls and legends and werewolves and all that sort of stuff. And I think that pretty much set my mindset for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Well, explain a lot.
Well, as I say, it does kind of connect to it does sort of fit the perfect ghost story to scare you. And a skull is so iconic. When you think about a skull, it's such an iconic personal thing, because when you think about your head, we read so much on a day-to-day basis when interacting with people that once all the skin and that is stripped off, the skull is a really personal symbol. So anyway, when we started looking at this, we realised rather quickly that the skull factor was such a huge subject, and it crossed over into so many different cultures and different understandings and different all sorts of things that we came up with skulls. So we're going to do a two-parter, as Mark said at the beginning of the show. We're going to do stuff today, and then next week we're going to go on and continue this looking at skulls and the impact they've had and why they're so relevant in the paranormal field, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. Now, screaming skulls themselves are actually, and I was quite shocked at this when I was researching this, they're actually unique to the UK.
They are, but it's... I mean, screaming skulls, there's quite a bit of it actually in Europe. You don't really get it in North America whatsoever, but it is predominantly England, but there are a few in Europe as well. But that's all to do with the legends of, when monasteries and nunneries and when they built cathedrals hundreds of years ago, they used to have that thing where they would sacrifice somebody, i.e. locking them up in the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the European ones come from. The skulls being removed when they've been renovating the place and then, knocked down the false wall and found a skeleton, and then they've taken the skull out and they started hearing moaning and everything.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, it was incredibly interesting just to start with. I mean, I found a guy called David Clark, and he actually he did his PhD thesis on skulls, believe it or not. You can do that, apparently. And it was on head cults, so he must have been doing something like, I don't know, social sciences or something like that. And
what?
Social sciences? Would that
Yeah, what did you say before? Head what?
Head cults.
Oh, right, okay.
What did you think I said?
I'm not going to repeat it.
Ah, one of those, eh?
Yes.
Now, I found his thesis incredibly interesting, and it sort of led me down different pathways. So we are going to cover screaming skulls. We're going to start with screaming skulls, but we're going to move on through some of the more other areas of skulls as well tonight. Now, basically, let's have a look at screaming skulls. Let's go where how we've advertised the show.
I'm not.
So, first of all, let's have a look at what defines a screaming skull, Mark?
Right. Well, screaming skull. Well, a lot of it has to do with the legend, really. If, as I say about them being bricked up and walled up, if a skull's been disturbed, then outbreaks of the paranormal, poltergeist like phenomena.
Phenomena.
Will plague the residents of the house until the skull is replaced back to its favourite place. Under no circumstances must the skull be removed from its resting place. And the origin of the skull is unclear, but in oral tradition, the date it took up residence is often placed outside of living memory. Again, going back to the walling up and bricking up between the 15th and 18th centuries, usually as a result of violence, for example, murder or execution.
Or, I found out, as a particular attachment to a property.
Yes, there is that as well, because there's been people buried in their back gardens as well.
Well, even in buildings as well. Do you know what I mean? It led on. So, looking around, there was I love this word, a plethora. I love that word. There's a plethora of stories about screaming skulls across the UK, which is sort of where my search, or our search, should I say, started. So, but we're going to look at two of the main ones that are probably the most famous. Now, the first one we're going to look at is in a place called Bettiscombe Manor. Now, this is down your way, Mark, in Bridgeport, in Dorset.
That's right.
Dorset.
Bettiscombe Manor in Bridgeport, Dorset. Yeah, I know it very well, because I used to go fishing off of West Bay there, which be next to it. And yeah, everybody knows Bettiscombe Manor. You don't go down there at night, you don't. No.
Very good. Love the accent. I actually tried to do the accent, but went north, I feel.
Every time you do try and do a Somerset accent or a West Country accent, you do end up going, "Hey, up, lad, trouble up that mill," and it's just like, no, Kerry, no.
That's a lot of all of my accents tend to end up north, I have to say. No matter where I'm trying to do an accent, I tend to go north. Anyway, back to Bettiscombe Manor. Now, the story goes...
Say Bettiscombe.
Oh, sorry. The story goes... Do you want to tell the story of this?
I can do. Okay. Azariah Pinney, or John Frederick Pinney, depending on which version of the story you read, because there is quite a few versions, lives in Bettiscombe Manor and was somehow banished to the West Indies in 1685. And although it says for some activity, from what I can remember from local legends and everything, it had something to do with him and maids when he was growing up in his manor with his parents, and it was to do with not being able to leave the maids alone, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can imagine
that
be true.
Sort of thing. And that sort of thing, yes. Yeah, and he was banished to the West Indies, basically. And then somehow, God knows how he did it, but he managed to find his way back to England. And I think it was something to do with, when he was over there, he managed to get into the rum and the sugar cane trade, and he made a pile of money, came back with an African slave. And unfortunately, that poor bugger he brought back with him, he made his life absolute hell. Very unhappy, and thank God he didn't live very long. But his dying wish was that his body be returned to his native land in Africa, you know? And this was never done. And he was buried in a local churchyard, and immediately groans and other terrifying noises were heard coming from the grave. And Azariah, or John, it was probably John Azariah, was forced to remove the corpse from the grave, and he stored it for a time in the attic. Oh, nice! And over time, the body crumbled until all that remained was the skull. Many attempts have been made to remove the skull, and I know all about this, and it's true. There have been quite a few attempts. It's been thrown into a pond. It's been taken out and taken. I think it was 300 miles away. But scream, and it had to be brought back to the house on the account of the screams and groans that are actually heard in the house. And so much for the legend. In 1963, the screaming skull was actually examined by a pathologist, and it was determined that the skull was actually between 3,000 and 4,000 years old, and was from a European woman. Some think that it could have come from the Iron Age ritual site at Pilsen Pen. I know that place, I doubt it, which is situated near the manor house. But there has been no authenticity, no verification that this skull is 3,000 years old. Now, what I can tell you, from being a local, knowing the legends and that, is there is that one that it's a slave. There's also that one that it was John himself. And there's another one that it was his wife. So there's about 3 or 4 different versions going along. But they do go on the same theme that as soon as the skull's taken out of the house, that's it. Screaming, ooby booby, and all that goes on in the house.
I found this a lot with different stories about how or why the skull actually wants to be in the house. Now, my argument with this one is, if it was a slave that is the skull is supposed to be of.
None of the locals think it is whatsoever. I don't believe that one at all.
No, but if it is, and the reason was that his native wish was to be returned to the native land, surely it wouldn't be necessarily the skull being in the house. It would be the whole thing being needed to be shipped back to where he came from. You know,
it was. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that one you can completely debunk that, because everybody knows who lives up there. It's either John himself or it was his wife, and the evidence goes more towards his wife, and it was her favourite place, but she was walled up. And she disappeared, went missing, and then it was the same thing as I described earlier. People doing renovations found the skull, found the skeleton, but when they tried to take it out of the house to bury it, that's when it started screaming and everything. And they tried several times.
That kind of, to me, that makes more sense, because at the end of the day, the wife would have had a connection to the property, and this is a common theme. This is a common theme with screaming skulls. They always seem to have a huge connection to the property, and that would make more sense to me that it was that. And as I say, this alleged pathologist said it was actually a woman, but the age thing, I don't know. I mean, with this one, I mean, the worst bit about this, and again, with these stories, you know, you have to sort of take them with a pinch of salt a little bit, because he took the corpse from the grave and stored it in the attic.
Yeah, no, a load of rubbish.
You know, decomposing bodies in the attic. I mean, I'm no expert of decomposing bodies, but I've read a little bit about body farms, and they kind of smell, and they kind of liquidate, and they kind of... Do you know what I mean? It's a bit isn't it?
Look at Tibetan sky funerals. That kind of tells you what goes on as well, so...
Yeah. Now, I actually found an article by a guy, he's a Dorset folklorist and a historian, John Simmons Udall, who wrote an article from Proceedings of the Dorset Natural History and Archaeological Society. And I thought, well, you know, let's have a look and see what he had to say. It goes back, it's 1910, this goes back to, this article. And he actually saw the skull. And he was inclined to doubt that it was actually that of a black servant at all, even though that's the story that he got told. And he actually looked at this skull, didn't he, Mark?
Yep.
And he said the skull was by no means a large one. The forehead certainly was low but not receding. The upper half of the cranium only was preserved. The lower jaw was being missing. It was 7.5 inches and in depth to the roof of the mouth 5.5 inches.
And ladies, you can do a lot with 7.5 inches. Anyway.
Anyway.
What about carrots? Good grief.
From a phrenological point of view, the bumps at the base were highly developed, and he doesn't recall there being any teeth in the jaw. But the skull itself is actually kept in the attic.
That's right.
And the attic extended over the entire area of the house, but it's incredibly... at this time, it was very dilapidated, and there was, you know, homes for bats, owls, and other fearful fowl. I love that expression, fearful fowl.
Fearful fowl, yeah.
And it was quite, I mean, health and safety would have had a heyday with it in this day and age, because it sounds like it was an absolute nightmare to get to the access to see this skull. Now... Close to the chimney breast, which is where the skull is near, there was a rectangular hole or shaft in the floor, and it went down quite a long way, but extended, in fact, to the bottom of the floor below, where the back of a bedroom cupboard touches it. And at first he thought it was a powder closet, which I'm assuming is an early day toilet. Am I right thinking that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Lovely. But after careful examination, he kind of thought that it was he might have thought it was a priest hole.
Yeah, well, I mean, when the Lord of the Manor was sent packing, that was the time of the assizes and the revolution that we had over and everything. And they allegedly said that him and 12 other people had been naughty boys, and that's why they were sent away. But when you talk to everybody down there, local legend, that everyone's pretty much convinced it was a wife, or it was a mistress, and whatever she'd done, she was holed up.
As I say, when I was reading about this, that was one of the versions that I came across. I mean, the most common one on the internet is actually about the black slave that he brought back. But, you know, looking at the pathology, looking at the, you know, other accounts, and looking at just logics on this one, I have to agree. I think it probably was a woman that died, and, you know, she unfortunately got this situation. But it doesn't change the fact that whenever this skull is removed, they have poltergeist activity.
Yeah, they do, and it's, as far as I remember, it has been documented. But you do have to look in like the Dorset records. But yeah, there are many legends and tales and this, that, and the other. But the one thing that does unite them all is, yes, when the skull's been taken away, there has been poltergeist activity, and there has been screams heard and moans and groans and this, that, and the other. So, you know, make of that what you will. But it all comes down to whoever's skull it is wants to be there. When you take it away, it lets you know it's not a happy bunny.
Not at all. Not at all. So, like I say, there's quite a few different stories. I found another one. This is another incredibly famous one. And this is the case of the screaming skull of Burton Agnes Hall.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, the ghost of Catherine Griffith, who lived at the Hall, she died at the Hall, died, both. She's now called Old Nance. I love that, Old Nance. That's what they call the ghost.
Old Nance, there she is with her ruff.
She died at Burton Agnes Hall in 1620 and is reputed to haunt the Queen's state bedroom. Now, Anne, she was the youngest of three sisters, the daughter of Sir Henry Griffith, who built the hall. And the story is that Anne had watched the building of this new house, could talk and think of nothing else, fell in love with the house. It was the most beautiful house ever. And when it was finished, she went and visited St Quintin's in Harpham, about a mile away, which apparently is near St John's Well. Mm-hmm. And she was attacked and robbed by ruffians, but she was really badly hurt by this attack, and she died a few days afterwards, which is, I think that's quite sad.
Definitely. Well, you would have had all the energy coming out from that as well.
Exactly. I mean, that's quite a traumatic thing, isn't it? But she sort of like went between delirium and being coherent and sensible. And she told her sisters, and this is gross, right? I can't imagine anybody ever saying this, but allegedly, this is what she said, that she would never rest unless part of her could remain in our beautiful home as long as it shall last. And she made them promise her, when she was dead, her head was to be severed and preserved in the hall forever, to pacify her. And her sisters agreed to this.
Yeah, I know, just to, placebo.
Which you would do. You would go, yeah, whatever, darling. Whatever. To help ease your passing, we'll agree to anything at that point. But when she died, they didn't do that. They weren't that cruel as sisters. And they buried her in the local churchyard. However, strange things began to happen in the hall. Loud crashes and bangs were heard. Poltergeist activity erupted in the depth of the night. The family were terrified. And remembering their broken promise to Anne, they set out to make amends. And this is where it gets a little bit gruesome.
you can read all this out, love, because it's like... Bleh.
I know. Well, they had a word with the vicar, went along to her grave, dug her up, opened the coffin, and whilst the rest of her body was beautifully preserved and still nice and lovely, her skull was allegedly detached already from the body and had nothing on it at all. It was just a skull. It was bare of all flesh. And only the grinning skull remained.
Sorry, I completely zoned out there. I was waiting for Brian Blessed to go, Hawkman dive! Sorry, carry on.
I can't believe I said flash instead of flesh. I don't know where my mind is at the moment.
We know.
It's a little hot, that's all I can say. Now, I mean, God, it helped the family out, didn't it? That she'd already sorted out her head for them. I mean, it was just a skull sitting there.
Yeah.
Now, I did look into this to see if there was a logical explanation, because I always like to try and find a reason to back up the story. Oh, that was my chair. Sorry. To back up the story, and there is no reason why a head would detach, be completely devoid of any flesh or hair if the body was still preserved. There's no reason for that whatsoever. The body will decompose kind of evenly throughout.
I mean,
the things I look into, honestly, it's disgusting. Some of the things I look into on shows.
That's where some of the Lesbians of Vampirism came from, isn't it? Because after you die, your hair still keeps growing and your nails still keep growing. And some people who had, what was it they died from, and all the blood went to the faces. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, the skull was actually buried in various places in the garden and outside and this, that and the other. And no, to no avail. People, heard the screaming and heard this, that and the other. And then, they went to the vicar, have a word. And he said, well, I think we should put it in the house because it might stop everything, you see. Yes, Morty? So they put the skull in the house, and that was it. Screaming stopped.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. Yeah.
Now, in later years, they actually hid the skull. It used to be out on display in the main hall.
Right.
But in latter years, it's still there. It's still in the property, but it's hidden. It's been put into a wall somewhere, but they won't divulge.
Yeah,
They
do you know why?
assume it's in the Great Hall.
It is. It's the whole reason the skull was hidden is because people kept trying to pinch it, basically. Because you've got people like us who respect things and will investigate things properly and this, that, and the other, and then you have idiots that go to these places and think, "Oh no, I'm going to steal the skull, see if we can make it scream." And that's why, in the end, they said, "You know what? We've had enough of this," and they put her at rest inside one of the walls somewhere in the building.
Yep. So she's still there, allegedly.
Yes.
However, I did also come across a article that said that there is no verification that Anne and her two sisters were there, that it's basically just a story. But I found so many that verified it. I even went to the actual website for the hall itself.
I'm on this, yeah.
For the Burton Agnes Hall. I actually went to the actual Burton Agnes Hall site, and this is the story that they came up with that is on their actual website. So,
I know you love talking. Can I just say something?
I know, sorry.
You can actually do paranormal investigations at the hall. So I'm rather thinking if we might one day do a pre-record at that place. It's an idea.
It's very much an idea for Burton Agnes Hall.
What do you guys out there in Radioland think?
You know what? I actually think this would be a good, oh God, I hate this word, test for a medium.
Actually, yes.
Where's the skull?
That would be interesting, and I think that would make a very interesting radio show. I mean,
the assumption that it is in the Great Hall, but it's not verified. They won't say. Nobody knows for sure just where it is in the hall. So that would be a really good experiment. If somebody could locate the skull where it is in the hall. Having said that, how we could then back that up? They're not going to let us take a wall down, are they? Do you know what I mean? No. That's the problem with that. But somebody somewhere must know where that skull is.
I think, seeing as you are particularly gifted as well in that department, I think if we did a radio show and perhaps took Mr. Andy Mercer or Mr. Paul with us or Mr. Richard with us, or all of them, I think it should
be a whole thing.
I think we would do quite a good show, and it would be verified by people to say, actually, yes, she did do this and she did do that. So, yeah.
Or she didn't.
And Mark just stood in the background going, "Yeah, bloody aliens!" You know.
Oh my goodness. So we're only going to cover two of the most famous cases because, and I'll tell you why, there was so many different versions of Screaming Skull tales that we heard, like that I read about.
Yeah.
I mean, even down to there was one that I read that was supposed to be this highwayman guy, and it wasn't a highwayman guy. Another version said it was a reverend or a priest or something like that. And that led me down to a completely different avenue. So I then started to look at why. Why is the skull so intrinsic in our psychology and stuff like that? And why does it have such an impact? So when we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back from the break, that's the kind of angle we're going to go.
Nearly!
We'll see you straight after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are. to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Oh, welcome back to the Dark Mirror Show tonight. We are looking everything Skull Factor. I'm here with my co-host, Mark Manley. I say good evening. I'm starting the show again, Mark. I've lost it tonight. What is wrong with me?
I think what you need to do is hit rewind and go and welcome to the show.
I know. Let's start again. Let's calm it down. It's the heat. It must be getting to me. That's all I can say.
Yes. Yes. Funny how it's normally me who does that sort of thing and hasn't done it.
I know. I don't know what's wrong with me tonight. Anyway, going back, at the beginning of the show, I referenced a gentleman called David Clark, and he did a thesis regarding the head cult traditions and folklore surrounding the symbol of the severed human head in the British Isles. Because, like I said, the screaming skull thing is unique to the British Isles. It's incredibly strange. Now, he recorded 32 English Guardian skull legends. He calls them Guardian skull legends. But he noted that although many were missing, 7, including the Burton Agnes skull, had been walled up within the property.
Thank you. What did I say?
I know. Little Mr. Know-It-All. But 10 remained on display in the UK. So there are certain places that you can go to and see a screaming skull if you wish to. But I sort of went down, at this point, on my research, I kind of went down a different angle, and there was Mark going, I want to do aliens. I was like, no, let's go down this angle. So that's why we're doing a 2-parter. So, okay, Mark, why? What is it about skulls? What is it about this? Let's have a look at this.
Oh, there's also a few bits that aren't in here, but when you look at the New Guinea tribes and everything like that, who did, used to do the cannibalism as funeral rites. Mm-hmm. Some of the tribes, depending which ones you go to, they would eat the eyes, and they would start with the flesh on the skull first, because it was like eating the heart, eating the eyes, eating the brain. It's all to do with the soul and helping your loved ones pass on, but also it's involved in you taking their strength and their energy, and they would do it with their enemies as well, with things like that. And that's where I personally think that the origin of the skulls being intrinsic and this and the other comes from, because we all look out of our own eyes and we all talk out of our own mouths, and some of us say some very rude words out of our own mouths. Kerry!
Didn't say it. Didn't actually say it. Just putting it out there. I didn't actually go there.
Very well held. But anyway, that's where
filtered. I like the word filtered. We filtered that. It proves that I actually think before I speak.
Sometimes it goes all the way back to cannibalistic rites. I mean, the Iceni tribe over here in England, they used to do it. Boudica, her and her tribe, they would do it only with their enemies. But back along, pretty much everybody would cut bits off and eat it, just to get the living daylights out of people. But certain tribes do it because they think they're going to take the person's energy, strength, whatever, and some tribes do it because it's a way of recognising and helping their beloved ones pass on.
Mm. There are lots of different ways of looking at skulls, isn't there? I mean, in the UK specifically, it's a visible reminder of our own mortality. Mm. And the screaming skull factor, I mean, you couple that with a bit of supernatural phenomenon. Oh, I can never say that word.
Phenomenon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It just makes them a magnet. It just takes it and makes it, like I said right at the beginning of the show, it's like the perfect ghost story, isn't it? It's the perfect thing. It's got everything in there.
Well, there is, but I mean, you've got to remember also over here and in Europe, beheading was a form of execution as well, so it stems from there as well. It's not just a tribal
thing. It's such a personal thing, isn't it? Removing the head.
It would be, because you're kind of knackered without your head.
True. This is true. Now, apparently, the famed screaming factor of these skulls is actually really, really hard to actually pin down.
Yeah.
You know, it's all hearsay. It's all legend and myth and folklore, and it's got lost, and we've not actually had in modern day a specific recording of it all. I mean, that would be interesting. Let's get one of these skulls and remove it from the property and do a paranormal investigation.
I still think, because I've just been looking in the chat room and everybody's said, yeah, that's a good idea. We should see if we can do a show from like Bettiscombe Manor. So I think you should have a go at approaching them and see what we can do.
I'll have to get my persuasive powers on.
I could talk the hind leg off a donkey, and my late dad always said I could sell sand to the Eskimos. But to be honest, you're prettier than me, so use it, girl. Work it.
I do. On a regular basis.
But that's a different show entirely.
Oh, sorry, that's my other network.
No, I'm not going to go there. No.
Anyway, back to topic. It might be that the skulls themselves represent just an earlier tradition. So it could be back. It could be something that links back to like the Celtics. Or, Jennifer Westwood cited in this thesis that there is little surviving evidence for guardian screaming skulls in Celtic regions of the British Isles. However, you can't rule it out. You can't discount it. You don't know if that tradition took and then evolved, and then these legends and stuff kind of grew up around that. You don't know.
Well, we used to take the heads of our enemies and put them on spikes and stick them outside our house and say to our other enemies, you see that? It's going to happen to you if you don't bugger off,
Yeah.
So you've got to invoke fear or caution, celebrate the memory of the dead, celebrate life. You can have the heads as a symbol of vanity or as a symbol of life after death, a symbol of change, as means of obtaining good luck or obtaining bad luck, especially if you're the person whose head it is. As a symbol of toughness, machismo, courage, bravery, or indifference to death and danger, or as a symbol of non-conformity, free-thinking, and rebelliousness.
Yeah, there's such a symbology around the skull, isn't there?
You got the skull and crossbones with pirates, but that comes from all the way back to the Freemasons. So, but yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where the skull and crossbones for pirates originally comes from, and it's to do with a certain Scottish pirate who was to do with the Freemasons. Let's talk about that on another show.
It kind of... It's under debate, is all I can say. All I can say is, with the skull and crossbones, it kind of makes you look hard, doesn't it? It kind of gives you...
It does.
It's a scare factor. It's a... you see the skull and crossbones, it initially evokes that, oh my God, kind of factor. It's, that's what the skull and crossbones does. So when you start looking at how skulls are used, as I say, there are so many different areas that the skull links into. I mean, going back to screaming skulls, when you look at these alleged screaming skulls, a lot of them have been dated to prehistory and are likely to be female and not male.
Well, women were treated like absolute dirt back then anyway. I mean, they were just things for the lords of the manor to do what the hell they wanted with. And then when they'd had enough of them, that was it, they'd kill them. But, so, yeah, unfortunately, those poor buggers, including all the witches in the witch trials and everything, treated so unfairly and treated badly. They should never have happened. But one thing I've just remembered is, what's the symbol for poison then, Kerry?
It's the skull.
So, and another thing is, I was just thinking, motorbike gangs. I mean, I'm part of a motorcycle group. It's not a gang, it's a motorcycle group. But lots of other motorcycle gangs and groups, they use skulls and crossbones because it is a sign of machismo and, hey, I'm big hard nut,
Exactly. But there have also, going back, I keep taking it back into history and you keep bringing it forward into the modern times.
Oh, we've got to bounce off each other somehow.
Ooh, bouncing off each other.
Hey, that's another show.
But when you look at it, they used to use skulls, and so David Clark said it was guardian skull. That's what he called it, and he also called it the genius loci concept or loci concept, which in Latin actually means spirit of the place, derived from how the place location is used or thought about. So skulls became almost like a god or a spirit of a place. And this kind of, in the UK, it lingered. So it could be that that is where this screaming skull legend mythology has come from, is that, you know, if you remove the skull, you're taking away the god or, you know, the spirit of the place. And that's why they're so integral to the actual buildings.
I definitely think the Guardian legend comes from that, because if you've got somebody who loved that place and they're there, and the local legend, everybody knows that skeleton is there, and it's been said that, you know, there will be far injustice to anybody who takes the skull away, and then somebody tries to do that, and in the what do you want to call it, the oral memory or whatever, you can hear the screaming and the yelling and this, that, and the other gets put back, and that's going to get passed down and down and down and down throughout the ages. And you're going to get the Guardian myth, you're going to get the Guardian screaming and this, that, and the other. But it all stemmed from somebody who originally loved the building or whatever, or was wronged in that building. But you can see where it all comes from straight away.
Yeah, and he also cited that in many areas where the legends are occurring, the place names are actually Celtic origins.
Yep,
and
definitely.
where they used to be displayed were facing doors, on windowsills, hearths, rafters, liminal places. Now, I had to ask our lovely Andy Mercer what a liminal place was, because I didn't know the meaning of liminal. And to be fair, the internet wasn't particularly helpful on this one. And he said it's where the boundaries are thin, like a graveyard or entry points for malevolent spirits.
Yeah, like the
So that
doorways
lends
of
it, but that lends it to the guardian factor, doesn't it? That
Definitely.
protection, that, you know, that looking after something.
Well, no, exactly. And as Richard in the chat room just said, it's widely believed in most ancient cultures that the soul resides in the head.
Exactly. Now, there is an alternative which is a more metaphysical than supernatural. And because of the dating, I mean, that was the other thing I found incredibly interesting, that the dating of a lot of these skulls are around the 16th century. And if you look at the sociological or sociological, either or, in late Elizabethan and Jacobean world, there was a flowering of metaphysical contemplation regarding mortality and the vanities of life. And that was reflected in lots of their like plays and arts and literature and stuff like that. And could it be that... What on earth are you doing?
Who, me?
Yeah, what's that noise?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I'm melting. I put the fan on. I didn't realise you could hear it. There you go.
I could hear it very loudly. It sounded awfully... Anyway, that's another show.
Really?
He was...
Can't take you anywhere, can we?
Honestly, it's the heat. It's getting to me. All I can say. Could some of these skulls represent, going back to this Elizabethan Jacobean world, of the mortality and vanities of life, reiterating that point, could some of these skulls represent the memento mori for the Jacobean cult of melancholy? Now, I looked into this because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Wonder what that is. And apparently the memento mori is the Latin for remember that you have to die. That's cheery, isn't it?
And if I remember rightly, there was a resurgence of that in Victorian times where they used to pose the dead for photos. And that was memento mori.
That's right. Exactly. So there is this fascination, isn't there? The art of dying.
I mean, until we actually get proper evidence, and I'm not talking like these TV shows and this, that, and the other. I'm talking until one of us, when we're out on our proper investigations, filming and trying to get some real evidence, when we get real proper evidence, and then we start researching that, and as to what actually happens when you go, what happens when your energy leaves that, what leaves your meat-covered car that you drive and goes into something else. Nobody's ever going to know until that happens. So until then, everybody's going to be fascinated with death, and they're going to be fascinated with it, every single aspect of it, whether it be dark or light or gruesome or funny, you know?
That's true. So leading on, I then was looking for, in the dark recesses of my brain, I had a very specific skull thing that led me on in the research that we did. And this was linked with a religion. Now, oh my goodness, the Roman Catholics are absolutely fascinated with bones and skulls.
They are. Jesus, they are indeed, there, sir.
Honestly, in St. Munditas, I'm really bad at pronunciation
Munditas.
on these places.
St. Munditas.
There are relics and skulls are found in the side chapel at St. Peter's Church in Munich, and they're revered every year with a high mass and a procession.
Yeah.
Then I found another one. There's a skull chapel in Zemana,
Poland.
In Poland. That has, my goodness me, 3,000 holy skulls on display and 21,000 hidden in the cellar. And allegedly they may be of saints who were killed by command of the popes of Rome. How nice was that of him?
Oh, they were, the popes back then were horrible. Look at the Borgias.
800, I mean, this is a lot of people. 800 holy skulls are inside the Otranto Cathedral in southern Italy, and hundreds overlook the altar, which has like an idol of the Virgin Mary and the baby Jesus.
Well, that's not going to give that kid nightmares when he grows up.
Now, going on, I also remembered a particular church, and I had to quite look this one up because it was quite beautiful, I think is the expression I would use.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
This makes me look a little weird because I actually find this incredibly beautiful.
Is in a macabre way.
Not really, because I actually just find it incredibly beautiful. It's the Church of All Saints in Sedlec in the Czech Republic, and it's otherwise known as the Bone Church.
Yeah, I know. It's used in many films, many horror films. I think the catacombs in France are used a lot as well. But the church, I know the one you mean. That church, if I can remember rightly, was it? I think it was because of the plague or something like that. But basically, they could not contain the remains or the bones anymore, and they had to find something to do with them. So rather than desecrate them by grinding them up and turning them into powder or whatever, somebody had the bishop or whatever had the idea of, hang on, decorate the church with it, and they did.
That's right. Now the Sedlec Monastery, basically, there's a whole history to this that we haven't got time to go into really. But basically, what happened was it became overcrowded, and an ossuary.
Yeah.
Is that how you would say that?
Sorry, yeah. Was
built to store the skeletal remains, and that is quite frequently used when burial space is scarce. They're first buried in a temporary grave, and then after some years, the skeletal remains are then placed in a crypt on an ossuary. Now, the task for this was given to a half-blind monk who actually spent his time gathering bones and stacking them to make room for new bodies coming into the cemetery. But when the Black Plague broke out in the 14th century, and you can imagine the amount of people that wanted then to be buried was absolutely astonishing. But in 1870, a local woodcarver, Mark, please say the name because there's no chance I've got a chance of saying this word.
Hang on. František Rint.
That's him. František Rint. Now, he was employed for the dark task of putting the bone heaps into order because the blind monk really didn't do a particularly good job.
Like a Rubik's cube that he really couldn't get the grasp on it. He couldn't see it properly, and there was feet sticking out of ears and everything. It was a bit terrible.
It wasn't very good. He didn't do a very good job, but we have to give him allowances because he was half blind, bless him.
Very sad, yes.
I know. Now, he spent years assembling the bones, and he was quite artistic. And he's created an absolute masterpiece. It is known as the Church of Bones. And this is on my bucket list for sure.
Yes. I'd love to do a show there as well.
At some point in my life. At some point in my life, I have to go to this place. The Church of Bones. Now, the bones were used as a decoration and superimposed over pre-existing structures of the church, which were made of bricks and mortar as normal. He actually bleached the bones. So he put so much care and work into this place. He bleached the bones in order to give them a uniform look, and he has made it. And look it up on the internet, guys, because seriously, it is phenomenal and amazing, and in my personal view, absolutely wonderful. He's made candelabras, altars, coats of arms. He's made, the central chandelier is built with at least one piece of every bone that is present in the human body. Oh my goodness, it is absolutely phenomenal. I was looking at pictures with awe, absolute awe, that he's taken. I can't wax lyrical enough about this place. I mean, then this isn't the only place. There are other places in Europe, such as the Santa Maria della Conzione. Oh my goodness, dei Cappuccini, sounds like a coffee, in Rome.
Yeah.
In Italy, the San Bernardino all'Ossara, that's in Milan.
You're doing it. You're doing fine, love. Carry on.
Oh, okay then. The Skull Chapel in Sesmna.
Go on.
That's in Poland.
Yeah.
And the Capella dos Osso.
Yeah.
That's in the city of Evora. That's in Portugal.
That's right. Chapel of Bones, it means. Capella de Ossos.
Oh, thank you. And there's a more recent version, which is, oh my goodness,
Dumont.
Ussuri, and that's in France, and that actually contains the remains of more than 130,000 French and German soldiers that fell at the Battle of Verdun during World War One. So actually, that's, for modern history, that is quite poignant.
Yeah, there was also, if I remember rightly, there's a famous photo. There's two photos. One is dating from Second World War. One of them is the helmets that were collected from the dead, and the Germans turned it into a pyramid, and it was actually really, when you saw how many helmets went into this pyramid, it was just disgusting and quite terrifying. And there was another one similar, and it was human skulls from people from one of the death camps, but I can't remember which one. And it just makes you think, humans are the worst out there. Out of all animals will do things purely because they need to eat or to be number one in their group. Humans will do it just because they want to be bottom,
Nearly.
Yeah, humans
Now,
will do it
we
just to be horrible.
cannot give a nod to these places without looking at, again, on my bucket list, oh my goodness.
You've got a very big bucket, haven't you?
I've got a huge bucket list, mate.
Yeah. I thought you had.
Oh, close to the bone on that one.
Oh, no, bucket list.
Bucket list.
Yeah.
Paris catacombs. Catacombs?
Catacombs.
Tell me about the Paris catacombs, Mark.
It's a network of old caves, quarries and tunnels that stretch for hundreds and hundreds of miles underneath Paris, as the name Paris catacombs comes to mind. And if I remember rightly, it was almost the same thing. The graveyards were getting full, the plague hit and everything like that. Everything was starting to smell, and they had to find somewhere to inter the remains. So they put it underneath the ground where they tunneled out miles and miles and miles of the things. But they already had some tunnels down there from the quarries and stuff anyway. So I digress. Right, and it's lined with the bones of the dead. I mean, again, many films have used the catacombs to, how can I put it, give an eerie feel. There's a film called As Above, So Below.
Yeah.
That's set in the catacombs. And that's quite a creepy film. But,
Very creepy.
Yeah, and what was I going to say? The Paris catacombs had their origins in the limestone quarries. I was right. Situated on the outskirts of the city, the natural resource has been in use since the time of the Romans, and provided construction material for the city's buildings. Just having a look. Yeah, 18th century Parisian cemeteries, overloaded, overpopulated. Yeah. Oh, give rise to improper burials, open graves, and unearthed corpses. Ooh. Yummy.
Now listen, what interests me about the Paris catacombs is its limestone quarry.
Yeah, because limestone will, A, it's crystal, but B, it will eat away at the what's left.
Only get paranormal activity if it's linked to water.
And, funnily enough, there's a river that goes through Paris.
Funnily enough. Now...
And there's part of the catacombs actually goes under the river.
It does. Now, that became incredibly interesting to me because of all the paranormal activity that is linked to skulls. The Paris catacombs is one of the most famous that you can go and investigate.
That's right.
You can go and do an investigation there. Like I say, This is on my bucket list. It's quite high on my bucket list. Just putting that out there. Universe, listen to me. Now, loads of activity happens in the mines, sorry. Now, listen, I was actually quite surprised because in the mines, right, there's a giant cinema screen, there's a projection equipment, there's like film, you can watch films, there's a stocked bar, there's a restaurant, there's even like an amphitheatre there.
Well, in Poland, you've got a cathedral actually built into the salt mines. That's all made out of salt in Krakow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Look it up.
Oh. I most certainly will. Now, the Paris catacombs is actually listed as one of the top 10 most haunted places in the world. Now, visitors have claimed that they've been touched by unseen hands, sensations of being followed, cold spots in certain areas, a few cases of hysterical breakdowns. Although, to be fair, you're in a place that's surrounded by bones and skulls. I would be shocked if you wouldn't feel something down there. And a few others have claimed to have been strangled.
Actually, no, I do
Allegedly
remember
so.
reading. Yes, I remember reading about that. And they thought it was the spirit of a monk, if I remember.
Not being funny. How can you pin that down?
There was one part. Unless I'm getting confused with somewhere else, but I'm sure there's one part of it that's set back just for the clergy and monks. I'm sure there is.
Well, I'd say I had a quick look at this. Now, my goodness me, it is huge. The catacombs are huge.
Well, they go for miles.
Miles and miles. 300 kilometres, which is actually relates to 186 miles. But only a fraction is accessible by the public. It's been illegal to explore the catacombs since 1955. However, during the 1970s and 80s, the catacombs were being explored illegally by urban explorers known as the cataphiles. Now, as I say, some of these have now been restored and changed into creative spaces, they call them, like restaurants. Can you imagine having a restaurant in the catacombs? How awesome would that be?
Well, having your dinner, eating your snails, and you've got the skull grinning at you.
This is where I go, I know I'm a little weird.
Oh, we know you're weird anyway, so don't worry about it.
This is where I know that I am like truly in my forte with all of this. Now, and I would love to investigate the Paris catacombs. I've known about it for a few years, and I so need to do that one. Oh my goodness!
I have another idea coming up. I do.
I know.
Involving the catacombs and maybe our little group.
The Parasearch Radio road trip is definitely got a bucket list as long as it's on at the moment. Watch this space is all I can say, because when I get these little ideas, off I go, trundling off, trying to sort it out. Now, that's a whistle-stop tour. We've looked at screaming skulls. We've looked roughly at religion and, skull chapels or bone churches. We've looked at all sorts of things tonight. Now, in our research, we haven't even looked at crystal skulls, which I use in my work.
That's because you're an alien, but carry on.
Thanks. Cheers for that. And we haven't looked at Max. I've got to talk to you next week about Max. I
know about Max, yes.
Max is an amazing crystal skull who I would love to meet. I plan on meeting him next time he's in the UK. He does his travels quite a lot, does Max. Anyway, moving on. Elongated skulls.
Yeah.
This is where you get all excited.
Aliens! There you go.
Are they alien or are they artificial cranial deformation?
Some are deformation, some have been tested and proved to be neither human nor deformed, nor anybody's got no idea what it is. So,
And another thing that absolutely fascinates me is the Dia de Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, which is celebrated in Mexico. I saw a wedding. Oh my goodness, this wedding was awesome.
They're wicked, aren't they?
Absolutely awesome. It was where I live. It was quite a... Oh, hello. What's that all about? Somebody was getting married. They used the Day of the Dead, James Bond style-y.
That's right, yeah.
They used that as their theme for their wedding. It looked absolutely incredible. This wedding was beautiful in my personal view. It's kind of where I'd go if I was to do marriage again, which I won't, just putting that out there. But, you know, if you're going to do a wedding, then do it in style. And they certainly did. Everybody was dressed up like the opening sequence of the James Bond film Spectre. And it looked absolutely amazing. We're going to be looking into that next week as well. So please join us next week. And on that note, we have come to the end of the show, Mark.
Barman said Dougal, realising he was a dog.
It's gone so fast. It always goes so fast.
That's because most of the time I'm just sat back listening to your lovely voice.
Oh, shut up. And there's my Essex. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat room. Don't forget, you can listen to any of the shows that Parasearch Radio puts out, either on podcast through Spreaker or on YouTube. And we have shows going out every night of the week. I'm back with you on Sunday. I am very, very excited for Sunday. On my Spirit Dimension show, I have the awesomely amazing Philip Hermit this week. Now, that may not mean a lot to you guys out there, but he is a main player in the crystal world. So for me, it is incredibly exciting. He works in a completely different way to the way I work. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating discussion. So we kick off live at 9 p.m. on Sunday. So please join us for that. As I say, we have shows going out every night of the week next week as well. Thank you for listening. And on that note, say good night, Mark.
Good night, Mark.
And I bid you all a very farewell. Good night, guys.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.